This conference will now be recorded.
So we will start since it's 1:01 and we have a quorum. So we'll start the meeting.
And we do not have any requests for public comment that I'm aware of, Vice President Deere.
All right, we'll go to the only presentation for this agenda is the fiscal year 21-22 customer agency workshop. And let me just say to the customers on board that this board has worked very hard to put a lot of time in on it with our excellent staff to prepare this budget for this year. But an important part of the budget process is input from our customers, so we're looking forward to that today. And I'll then turn this over to the general manager. Go on.
Thank you, Vice President Deere, and good afternoon to members of the board and members of the public and representatives of our staff, and of course, most importantly, our customers representatives who are on this call today. Like Vice President Deere mentioned, we have had a very active and busy set of workshops with our own board, 4 to be exact, in preparation for this particular workshop, the most important one, the customer agency workshop, to present to you basically our assumptions and what we're thinking about in terms of what impacts there would be to the rates and charges for fiscal year 21-22, starting in July 1 of this year, 21. And I'm going to hand you over to the extremely capable hands of our CFO and Executive Manager of Finance, Margaret Moja. And Margaret, if you would please present this item, and feel free to any members of the public to ask questions at any point. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and pleasure to be here with you all. I'm sorry that it's virtual, but we're so glad that we're able to share this information with you. So the presentation was sent out and it's going to be shared with you on the screen. I will make references to a page packet for those that are have that version in front of them. So with that said, let me just start by moving the presentation forward. Hold on 1 second. Need to get on the right screen. And as Patrick has shared, we have done a series of workshops with our board. Those are listed here on the screen here. We started back in February just to provide a general overview of sort of what are some of our budget objectives, some of the items that we're considering for this year. You'll see a little of that information on the next couple slides. Then we followed that up in March with just a review of our proposed expenses, again, to share the underlying assumptions for the fiscal year 21-22 budget. We then followed that up with a revenue focused workshop on April 16th. That again shared the underlying assumptions there, both on the terms of what our revenues are, different revenue sources, but then more specifically on the proposed rates and charges, and we'll be sharing that information as well with you today. And then finally, at the request of the board, we did add a 4th workshop so that we could address some additional questions that they had, provide additional detail. That was done on Monday, April 19th. So a very busy time for us. I wanted just to also share with you, if you look in the staff report, there are 2 links that are shared there. One is to the presentations. Those can be found on our website. So if you'd like for any more additional details, those are shared there. And if you would like to hear those presentations, I've shared the link to the meeting page, and you can access that information there and hear all over again. I believe we've been at this for 9 hours now. Happy to do a 10th hour now with our customers, and it's again, it's a great joy to be able to share the work that the West Basin does to serve our area, to meet the mission, programs of activities that are set by our board that follow our strategic business plan. So with that, let me turn your attention next to just the agenda. That agenda here is, again, just to kind of give you that general overview. Again, the proposed expenses. I will then turn it over to Barkev Marcelian, our Executive Manager of Engineering Operations, to talk about our 5-year capital plan. Then it will come back to me to focus in on the proposed revenues, and then end it with our proposed rates and charges. As Patrick said, if there are questions, I certainly would like to hear them. Our board would like to hear them so that we can incorporate that into our process as well. So now moving to page 10 of our board packet, wanted just to share with you about the budget considerations for fiscal year 21-22. We had shared last year, so it was a nice crossroads of a few items. We were, losing some key revenue sources, that would be our LRP. We had some additional expenses, and so we had some challenging year putting together the 2021 budget. And this year is no different in that we have other new challenges, if you will, and similar to probably all of our agencies, having challenges as to meeting the goals and objectives to our customers. But for us, it was to make sure that we understood the impact of the Metropolitan Water District rates and charges. And as we have shared with you in the past, passing on that information on to our customers and making sure that we understand what the numbers are so that we can, provide you that long-term perspective as we understand from Metropolitan Water District. Capital projects is certainly an important aspect to us. And again, Barkev is going to share with you, our plan for the next year, but also specifically, what does it look like in the 5-year? Because again, when I think about budget, it's not about the 1 year, it is about the multi-year. How do we plan for today and the impacts that it could have in the years to come, and be fiduciarily responsible in that particular area. Other areas for us was the standby charge settlement agreement. This is a situation in which we had a class action lawsuits filed in 2017. We've been addressing that particular matter, and there's an item before the judge for his consideration on that. The district is also looking to lower its cost of debt service over the next period of time. We have an opportunity here to be able to take advantage of this lower interest rate environment. We have some callable bonds that we're hoping to go out into the capital market in the next few months to be able to recognize some savings there, and certainly, and that will be a benefit to our customers. Certainly, we are all aware of the urban water management plan. I know that you have spoken to staff from West Basin as it relates to sort of where do you envision, if you will, the sales coming up, and where we are today. So that certainly gave some consideration, certainly for where we think we are today, but really that sort of 5-year outlook as well. And then finally, the Brewer Desalter, a decision was made by our board just a couple of months ago about what shall we do with the Brewer Desalter. It's been an area where it was started off as a pilot project. We've run it for a number of years. The board has made a decision to look at divesting from that particular operations, and so there's a process underway on that particular item. So again, a number of items for us to consider. Again, each agency that you represent has its own challenges. We're just wanted to share with you what are our impacts for us. So if I can move us to the next page, which has to do with our budget objectives. I do want to sort of address what it is that West Basin takes into consideration as well when it puts together its budget. First of all, it's about achieving our strategic business plan goals. And we have 5 goals that are identified there. Those 5 goals are water supply reliability, sound financial and resource management, water quality, customer service, environmental stewardship. And under each one of those items is an action plan, if you will, of what we're trying to accomplish to make sure that we achieve that. And we do that through operations, through programs, different activities, and these are all brought to the board for their consideration. And these numbers that we're presenting to you today are what staff believes is the cost to be able to produce and those results. From a finance perspective, as the CFO, these are the things that make me excited, which is about maintaining our financial stability. We want to make sure that we maintain our district's credit rating, especially as we go out into the market. It's of the utmost importance so that we can continue to achieve that low cost of borrowing. The district does maintain a AA rating from both Moody's and S&P. And so again, the decisions we make have a consideration of all of those items. And two criteria under that are specific importance of rating agencies is what is our debt service coverage ratio, as well as liquidity. So debt service coverage, just to remind you what that represents taking a look at all of our revenues, subtracting out our operating expenses, getting to our net revenues, and then dividing that by debt service. And what we try to do to maintain that is to look at a number of factors as it relates to it to ensure that we stay within that sort of AA range. Because again, as you will see from our capital program, and as we consider other projects into the future, it is important for us to be at that AA rating for that low cost of borrowing. Liquidity is another key factor. What is sort of your days cash on hand? And there's a formula associated with that. And so again, we want to make sure that we're sort of within the bandwidth, if you will, of our peer agencies in that AA category. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, and I'll just restate, is that the district has this vision to incorporate its long-term commitments by looking at today and putting together today's fiscal year 21-22 budget, but really taking a look out 5 years and even longer than that, because we do have other commitments specifically there to represent that. So I'm going to start with just giving you the punchline, which is based off of putting the revenues and the expenses together and the underlying assumptions. What we have here is the revenues and expenses shows here about a $223.8 million is our budget. That takes into consideration all of our operating expenses. That would include our purchase of imported water, our recycling operation, all of our other programs, and that provides debt service. And that provides, I'm sorry, not debt service yet. That provides us $187.6 million in operating expenses. That brings us to a net revenues of about $36 million. We have about $20 million in debt service. And part of that debt service is actually taking into consideration what we anticipate achieving from that debt transaction. We are planning, like I said, in a couple months. And that brings us to our projected debt coverage ratio. So we have long started targeted, if you will, what that particular that coverage ratio, and that's what we sort of work on in trying to assess sort of what are the expenses and the revenues associated with them. By achieving that 1.75, it does provide us these designated funds, and we go ahead and then turn that around and invest that back into our capital program. And the reason we do that is so that we don't have to go out and get debt. We don't have to debt finance everything. We try to see what we can finance from our designated funds. Overall, you can see here from a rate adjustment perspective that Metropolitan's rates and charges is about 3.5%. And this is again on its imported water. So the overall effective rate for our imported water is about 2.8%. And we'll get into why is there a little bit of difference between the two. So with that, I'll move on to our next section, which is our proposed expenses. So on our proposed expenses, if I can get your attention to page 14 of the packet, this shows you sort of a side-by-side comparison of the fiscal year 21 budget to the fiscal year 22 budget. And you can see it's a slight decline from last year, and part of it has to do with our contemplation of our debt service, but you can see that it's offset with some increases in our imported water purchases. Again, there is, you'll see about the acre feet assumption later on what we are using. We're using the same, essentially the same amount of acre feet from year over year. So really what the increase that you see there is about the additional cost for that imported water. Recycling operations, of course, is a big program for us here. It helps us to provide that local supply of water and that diversification in our own portfolio, and then the debt service associated to support that program. Our other program expenses, we'll go into details on those, but that would include our public information and education program, our water policy and resource program, water use efficiency, and we also have another program referred to as technical planning. And then finally, to our designated funds, as I mentioned, that sort of is the difference between the revenues and the expenses, and that funding that we get that helps us to be able to, one, meet our financial metrics, but two, more importantly, to reinvest into our system. And with that, you can see the most significant item, of course, is imported water purchases, but all costs are important here to the district, and that's why we're here today to share with you what those costs are. So let me go through first to talk about our district program budgets. We have 7 items that I will refer to today. The first one being our overhead expenses. Those expenses do get allocated across our operating programs. So the other 6 that you see here, they do get allocated to those particular programs so that you can kind of see what the overall effective cost is to produce that particular program. So let me get into the first one, and I'm now on page 16 of the packet. So our fiscal year 21-22 overhead cost is about $4.6 million, and it's shown you here in a little more detail. And again, for those individuals that would like a little bit more detail with what's included in all these items, I will just offer up that on workshop number 4, we go into a little bit more detail on to what each is included each one of those items, from the using an accounting term, the account that's there, or the specific breakdown for that. But what you see here is the cost for our board services program, the board of directors, our DLD, this particular building that we have our district headquarters at, and that would include costs for utilities, our guard service, our janitorial, outside landscaping, those costs that are included there. We also have a debt cost of issuance. Not only we have an opportunity this year in 2021 to do a debt financing transaction, but there should be an opportunity as well in 2022 to do a debt financing transaction. These are the costs of sort of putting that transaction together, including costs to the underwriters that sell our bonds on our behalf, to the other financial professionals that we use, including our municipal advisor, our trustee, our bond counsel, and including the rating agencies as well. General overhead and costs and services, what's included in that budget is consultant dollars as it relates to the other financial services that I have, audit services. It also includes our HR program, such as recruitment and sort of employee development, such as training and that aspect, if you will. Insurance, this represents the insurance specifically here, both our general liability as well as our property and crime insurance. Legal, this is the cost for our district counsel and other special counsel that's necessary to be able to support some of the ongoing litigation that we have, and so we have a cost associated with that. Memberships and sponsorships, there's a fair amount of memberships and sponsorships that we have here at the district. These are technical, they may be also advocacy type groups, and then again, we want to be able to partner with them to obtain information from them, resources, attend their conferences. So those are the items that we see there. And software and technology, no year than last year was a better way to understand sort of the importance of technology. We're using a great technology tool today to be able to share this with you, even though we cannot be together. So, but this represents all of our software licenses for just our sort of day-to-day sort of us to have our licensing. It also supports, if you will, our licensing for our software, our financial system, as well as other operational systems that we have here at the district. So that provides you just a general overview idea of that $4.6 million that's there. I'm happy to say that this is a reduction from last year. We did have higher costs last year, mainly because we had anticipated higher litigation costs with legal fees, as well as we also had the election costs that get recorded every other year, and so you see them pop in and then pop back out. And this is the year, of course, we've just had elections in November 2020, paid that bill, and so now we don't have any until the next election, which would be in November 22. So let me get into some of the next program areas, and this is where we really get into, I'll say, the programs that you probably are more familiar with, as I know that our team works with you to provide you good outreach, if you will, as it relates to who West Basin is and what it is we're trying to accomplish. So again, we have our education program. We are continuing on with our Water is Life art contest program, our Solar Cup. We anticipate that we will be back in person and able to provide those sponsors to our local schools in that area. We also are planning for virtual at the start of the year, hopefully in person at the end of the year. And the reason, again, we'll continue to monitor that as it relates to just what are the LA County health guidelines associated with that. And so we've made some assumptions as to when we anticipate there could be a shift, if you will, from virtual to in-person. On the outreach aspect, again, we have our general program marketing, our construction outreach, and our social media. Again, the social media is a great place for us to be able to communicate all the efforts that our staff and our board has done as it relates to meeting our mission and goals here at West Basin. Finally, in our media, we also have our direct mail to our customers, our constituents in our area, our annual ad to show and promote, if you will, who West Basin is, as well as other district collateral that we do to, again, promote West Basin. Events and tours, again, you see a number there. Again, we anticipate that some of this sort of tour aspect, that in-person tours, will be available to us in 2022. And then right now, Water Harvest, it's being envisioned as a virtual event. This will be discussed by our board in more detail at its May cycle to understand sort of how do we want to do our annual signature event, if you will. Is it virtual? Is it in person? Do we not hold the event? And so stay tuned on that particular one. But for now, the staff has made the assumption that we will be holding a virtual event. On to the next area, which is page 18 of your packet, and this has to do with our water policy and resource development. One of the important things that I think that this particular area does is about our legislative advocacy. We have both a federal and state firm that work with our wonderful team to understand the legislation that's out there about that at federal level and state level that impact us directly here in our service area, but also more specifically as it relates to water and to see how we can position ourselves in those areas. The demand modeling there is a follow-up, if you will, from the Urban Water Management Plan. The help on that one is to understand sort of what the impact is on changes that are being made in the water that is being delivered to our service area and understand the impact that can happen from them. We do have some dollars there for a consultant to help us with grants. Again, we want to see and benefit, if you will, where we can get grants associated with it. And we are continuing on with our water bottle filling station program that, again, this team does a great job to reach out to our service area to make those what we refer to as grants available that the district funds to our customers and our customers in our service area. The next area here is your water use efficiency program. And again, this is our conservation efforts, and there's a number of items that you see here. We do get a great amount of support from the South Bay Council of Governments to help us market this particular program and to be an extension, if you will, of the efforts here. We also then have a various number of other programs here. We try to identify where we have that grant funding associated with it. So you can see we have a Cash for Kitchens program. Again, this is we have federal and state grants associated with it. You can see a fair amount that's there. Those grants are actually coming to an end of this next year. So we're making full effort to be able to do that and work through that. We have our Malibu and Topanga program. That's also a grant-funded program. That program is actually coming to an end. after several years in September of this year. Ocean-friendly gardens, again, the district has made efforts throughout our service area to put these ocean-friendly gardens there. This is helping to support those particular programs. But in addition to that, there is funding associated with in there as well to do some training so people can understand a little bit more about ocean-friendly gardens and what that means. We do anticipate continuing on with our rain barrel program. Again, with COVID, we had intended this in-person event, for this fiscal year 2021. I think our team has done a great job to sort of pivot, to use that term, to find a way to be able to still show that program. And we now have a home delivery program, if you will, for this year. But for next year, we do anticipate going back to that in-person event so that we can, again, be able to put those rain barrels into use into our service area. We also intend to continue on with our grass replacement program. Metropolitan Water District has $2 per square foot, and we're adding an additional $1 in there for supporting that program. Again, encouraging people to take a look at their grass that they have, and can we convert them to using more appropriate low-use gardens, if you will, so that we don't have to have that high usage of water. Our Change and Save program, or specifically it had to do, and this year as it relates to our disadvantaged communities, but we saw such great success with that. We are continuing with that program with the rebates and other devices to be able to give out to our customers. So you can see there in total it's about $800,000. I should mention that the programs that I've just mentioned to you don't show any of the staffing time associated with that. We'll show what the staffing is in a future slide. This just is if you will, the direct costs, if you will, to vendors and other suppliers to be able to support us in our programming. And then I wanted to mention to you here about the technical planning. Technical planning is sort of a newer program for us in that we have some important sort of, I'll say, engineering work, but engineering work from an accounting perspective that cannot be capitalized. And so these are things that we are undertaking. One of them is our emergency response plan. Another one is our labor compliance manual. And to be able to update that labor compliance manual, as well as provide training to our staff to ensure that we're meeting those requirements there. The top item there is a partnership that we have with the LA SAN and LADWP. It's a three-way agreement in which there's a partner share that's there. We are in a couple years into it. There is a request by the City of Los Angeles to see about increasing that particular commitment from West Basin into the particular item. This particular request for that of $1.9 million has not been approved by our own board, but in planning purposes, budgeting planning purposes, we want to include that because again, this looks at MBR at the Hyperion project and how that could benefit us potentially into the future. As I mentioned to you, the Brewer Desalter is one of those decisions that we had, and so the board made an important decision on the fate, if you will, of where we're going with the Brewer Desalter. With the decision to go out and look at divesting from it, we do anticipate that there will be still some ongoing costs, even though we are not assuming any additional sales. And so what I will say here is that we're making an estimate of what we anticipate those costs to be. Again, as we learn more about sort of that divesting, we will be briefing our board as to the specific costs associated with this, but this is our first estimate, if you will, on what we anticipate those costs to be. And now on page 22 of our presentation, it refers to our recycled water operations. Now on this one here, I did include our labor and benefits and overhead, just so that you have a sense of sort of the totality of this particular program. Again, it's our most significant program outside of our imported water purchases. And so you can see overall a $40.4 million budget for fiscal year 21-22. We do have a contract labor that does support us both in our facilities and our distribution system. And the other significant items that you see right at the top is our utilities and our chemicals. Those are important variable costs that, of course, that occur, but those are costs that that are significant to us, and so we do have efforts underway to monitor them and see how we can manage them. The next biggest item, of course, is our facility maintenance. These items would be considered those items that are sort of your quick, your immediate fix, if you will, to change out certain components, if you will, but they are not ones that meet our capitalization threshold, and so that they would be recorded here on our operations side. But you will see that in order to support this program, there is a significant R&R program that Barkhead will talk about, and those are projects that meet our threshold, both in as far as dollars and time, to where we're able to capitalize the costs and depreciate them over the useful life of those assets. Again, we use consultants to support us in compliance monitoring, as well as our membrane consulting, as well as our customer support. We have an effort here not only to sort of expand our program, but also support our program, and we have consultants that support us in that effort, along with our staff as well. Important to us, of course, is the purchase of secondary effluent purchase water. With that water that we get from the Hyperion, is important to be able to take that secondary effluent water, further treat it for the purposes of our different customers, and to be able to deliver there. And so again, a total of $40.4 million for the recycled water operations. As I mentioned, outside of the last budget that I just shared with you, this here reflects our total budget labor and benefit costs. Now this would go across both our operating programs as well as our capital programs. So overall, you can see that it's about $9.5 million. So if you think about the overall $223 million budget that you see here, about 50-50, if you will, goes a little more maybe goes to the operations, but some of it goes to our capital. The point I'm trying to make here is that labor certainly is an important component here, but it isn't a significant portion to us. That being said, we did take some steps to take a look at what our labor costs are, and you'll see on the next slide sort of what are some of the decisions that were being made. But I did want to just to share with you that over the years, we have seen a reduction in our benefit percentage, and as a result of just that pension formula that you see there. Many, I know, public agencies are struggling, if you will, with that particular issue. The district has been able to manage fairly well through that. And again, as we bring in individuals here, we do see particular, benefits staying the same, but it's costing us less going forward. So as I mentioned to you, one of the ways that we're able to try to address, if you will, some of the things here is to take a look at our budgeted positions. We have 62 budgeted positions today, and we made the decision to hold 6 of those positions. They are not being funded, and that's at about $1.2 million when you take a look at those positions, both on the labor side as well, the labor dollar side, as well as the benefits. So again, one of the ways that we were trying to mitigate, if you will, sort of rate increases, is really looking into some of those positions and seeing can we be able to maintain our service delivery at the current levels that we have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Barkhead to share with you about the proposed 5-year program, and then you'll hear back from me after that.
Thank you, Margaret. Good afternoon, directors. Good afternoon, West Basin customers. So as Margaret mentioned, I'll go over some of our capital improvement projects and the expenditures for those projects. On this next slide, you'll see the first category. We have 3 categories for our capital improvement program. The first one here is new infrastructure, and new infrastructure includes the planning and design and construction of new facilities and improvements for our treatment facilities, as well as improvements and expansions where feasible of our recycled water distribution system. The other 2 categories we'll talk about a little bit later. One is for rehab and replacements, and there's another category for other non-recycled water type of projects. But for new infrastructure here, historically, this category had an average of about $20 million per year of budget. Looking forward here, you can see on the right side of the slide, we're looking at a little over $8 million per year on average, but the majority of that 5-year outlook is in the next fiscal year. So on this next slide, you'll see a little bit more detail about the projects that are in fiscal year 21 and 22. Not only the estimated expenditures for that particular year, this next upcoming fiscal year, but the total expenditures looking out to for each of the projects. What we do as part of the capital budgeting process is every year our project managers and engineers look at the projects at hand. If there needs to be some reprioritization, we do that. But we look at the latest information in terms of cost, in terms of schedule, and we include that information in an S-curve distribution of expenditures to see how much we would potentially spend in a particular fiscal year. So on this next slide, you'll see how that $30 million or $43 million is distributed over next 5 years. We particularly highlight the 2 projects that hold the brunt of those expenditures. One is the extension of the Palos Verdes recycled water pipeline to Palos Verdes Estates, a grant-funded project. Another grant-funded project is the phase 2 expansion of our Carson treatment plant with new and improved custom engineered microfiltration systems, which this project has a component, an R&R component to it, and an expansion component of it. But these are 2 of the projects that we're looking to implement in the next few years and move into construction. On the next slide, we talk about category number 2, rehab and replacement projects. Historically, over the last 10 years, we've spent on average $5 million per year on R&R projects. Our plant was built, or Edward C. Little plant was built around 1995, completed, and a lot of the infrastructure at the plant and throughout our systems have aged. And for us to feasibly maintain service and expand capacity where necessary, we would have to implement some of the rehab and replacement projects that you see before you. This next fiscal year, we're estimating the R&R budget to be around $21 million. On the next couple of slides, here on this slide, you'll see the 12 of the 24 R&R projects that we would be implementing in the next fiscal year for a total. On the next slide, you'll see the total, again, for fiscal year 21-22, be around $21 million for a total expenditure throughout the next 5 years on these same projects, around almost $113 million. The third if we were to take these projects again and distribute them over the next 5 years, this is how it looks. Key projects there include the improvements, the R&R that we would have to do on the solids handling systems that were built in 1995, the rehab of one of the tanks at the Chevron nitrification plant, and a project that's ongoing right now and in construction today that will continue on in the next fiscal year are the improvements on the cathodic protection systems throughout our distribution system. On the next slide is our third category. And in this category, we include projects related to the ocean water desalination project, certain improvements at our headquarters building, refurbishments at our headquarters building, and certain IT type of projects. Also included in this category, and you see a little bit more detail in the next slide of the costs, of the projected costs. Also included are the the West Basin labor on the whole CIP program, the contract operator labor for the CIP program. This is a mechanism of which we track our capital improvement program related labor in this category. So we project around $4 million in the next fiscal year for a total of 17 in the next within the next 5 years. And again, the next slide will show a distribution of those costs throughout the next 5 years. With that, that concludes the expenditures. The total expenditures around a little over $55 million for next fiscal year in capital improvement projects. I'm going to hand it over back to Margaret to talk about some of the funding sources for those projects. Margaret?
Can I get off mute? Sorry about that. So yes, as Barkev said, so it was important for us, as you can see, there is a fair amount of investment that needs to be done to maintain our facilities. And also some of the other projects that Barkev described as it relates to projects that are currently underway that will help us to deliver recycled water to our service area. And so we wanted to understand that aspect of what is our capital expenditures to understand then what is the impact that could happen from that. And so PAYGO is another way to say pay as you go, or earlier you heard me refer to it as designated funds, but this is us reinvesting back into our other things. So by us achieving that financial metrics, we're able to then be able to really be able to pay for a good portion of our projects out of our own cash rather than having to go out into the market. Commercial paper is a way that a means of what we do that. We have a line of credit available to us that as we need those funds, we will draw those funds. So we're not going out and securing debt today for projects that may or may not happen. We are, getting the debt just as we are moving forward on those projects. As Barkev mentioned, we do have a couple projects here that actually are being supported by a grant from the State Water Resources Control Board. It also comes up with it a low interest loan. And so we're taking advantage certainly of that low interest loan. And we thank both our federal, state, and our local partners to help us to be able to fund these projects here. So for instance, in that $5 million that you see in fiscal year 21-22, those are the partnerships that we have as it relates to the Palos Verdes pipeline. And so we thank you for supporting us, supporting our service area with that support. So overall, you can see sort of what the impact is. Again, as Barkev showed, these are the costs over the 5-year period of time. These are then how we anticipate spending them. And you can see that we're trying to balance, if you will, sort of what is being paid for with cash versus debt. So we can have that sort of intergeneration equity, if you will, as it relates to some of these things. Those items that are being debt financed are those that tend to have longer useful lives. And therefore, we can match, if you will, acquiring debt to sort of the useful life that's associated with it. So with that, I'm going to move over to the next section, which is our revenues. So now we're on page 38 of your packet. And again, this is the breakdown of our revenues. That revenue there, you see the largest portion there has to do with our imported water. That imported water does make up a 70% or so of our particular budget, followed by our recycled water. And then you can see some of our other revenue sources here. So we'll go a little bit more into imported water and recycled water when we get into the proposed rates and charges. But I wanted just to touch upon a few of our other revenue sources that you see here. So first one is our standby charge. Historically, we've been able to achieve around $10 million. So a good sort of fixed revenue source from us. Yes, it varies a little bit from year to year, but generally speaking, we were able to get $10 million. But as I mentioned, in 2017, a class action complaint was filed in the court, and there was a settlement agreement between the two parties back in October 2020. So that is before the judge today, and we are awaiting a decision on that. And so based off of some of that preliminary discussion in that settlement agreement, it does show sort of a wind down of our standby charge over an 8-year period of time. So there's an immediate impact as proposed, going from $10 million to $6 million in that first year. It then goes down for a couple years. It goes back up for the remaining 5 years. But by June 30th, 2029, the standby charge would no longer be a charge that's available to us. Next is, I wanted just to point out here about our local resources program incentive. As I mentioned to you last year in fiscal year 2021, when we were putting that budget together, we were dealing with a sort of another revenue source that we got accustomed to, which was our LRP program. That was a 25-year agreement. That agreement came to an end in March 2020, and it was about $7 million a year that we would get. There was $6.5 million that was the impact of, if you will, in last year, but overall it was about a $7 million revenue. Now we still do have an LRP agreement with Metropolitan Water District, but you can see it's substantially less than what we used to getting here. Again, as Metropolitan goes through its rate refinement discussions and where sort of this discussion will be in the future, we don't know, but for now we can say that we do have an agreement that does support specific customers, and it's when we have sales to NRG, any West Coast barrier sales that are above 12,555, or any customers that are along these laterals that are identified on this slide here. But again, not a significant number, but it does. It's another decision point that did have an impact to us, like I said, in this year's development of 2021, but has again an ongoing impact. And again, we wanted to be mindful of that as we prepare for future years with the district. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch upon, we do have other sources of revenues. We get about $1 million of interest revenues as it relates to there. I just wanted to share out, important to me is to make sure that we are fiduciarily responsible about that. And so we do assume and that, of course, that we follow our policy that is based off of the California Government Code. We have our own sort of restrictions associated with it that we placed, if you will, to ensure that we are maintaining an appropriate fiduciary responsibility associated with it, and that we will follow safety, liquidity, yield. And as it's shown earlier on the slides, as it relates to the water use efficiency program, we do have various grants. This just gives you a little bit more detail of what we receive from Metropolitan District as a member agency, what we're getting from the state, and what we're getting from the federal government. So a total of $421,000. And again, we will continue to look for those opportunities out there to support not only our conservation programs, our water use efficiency programs, but any of those other recycling projects or other projects that we can see and obtain grant funding. All right, so now to the rates and charges. So if I turn your attention to page 43 of the presentation, I just want to orient you on our rates and charges. There are 3 things that are happening here. One is that we have the charges that are considered West Basin's charges, and then there's Metropolitan's charges. Second is what is the factor that is being used to be able to determine on how we are assessing that particular rate or charge to our customers. And third is, when is the effective rate change? So if I could take you to the top of this particular one, is that our West Basin imported Tier 1 commodity rate is really a single rate to you, but it is made up of 3 components. So it is made up of, first of all, West Basin's reliability service charge. It is, as all of these items that are under here, it is on a per acre foot basis. However, when we change and when Metropolitan changes, it's at a different time. So you'll see that for West Basin, we have our rates change on a July 1, our beginning of our fiscal year. That's when our rates change. But for the Metropolitan rates and charges, they do their changes on a calendar year basis. Now they're on a fiscal year basis, but they choose to do their rates on a calendar year basis. And so they have made decisions already as it relates to January 2022, and you'll see that in a moment. But that's so we are able to understand what that impact is and incorporate that into the budget process. To the bottom part of the slide is the fixed charges. Now there are 2 of them. One of them that comes from Metropolitan Water District, and that is called the capacity charge. And the other one is the West Basin fixed service charge. So up until a few years ago, we had been 100%, if you will, variable as it relates to our own charge. But seeing that there was some decline and sort of drought conditions, if you will, we wanted to sort of stabilize our revenue sources, not have these sort of high swings up and down as it relates to rates, to be able to, meet the goals and objectives and programming that, is set forth by our board here. And so we put into place a fixed service charge. And you can see there that it's based off of an annual calculation based off of 3-year historic sales. And we'll go into what that calculation is. But again, as you will see, we change our rates on a July 1 basis. So our fixed charge is changing on July 1, is proposed to change on July 1. And the Metropolitan capacity charge is showing here is to be effective January 1, 2022. But before we get into the rates, I just wanted to share, first of all, as it relates to our water sales. As you can see here, we have, these are our imported water sales. We break it down into 3 components. One of them has to do with our retail sales, so most of the customers that's here. And for our barrier sales for our customer there on WRD, we have 2, which is the West Coast Barrier and the Dominguez Gap. So in that particular sort of assumptions that we look here, we do look at historic trends, if you will. We do have conversations with our customers to try to understand sort of where it is. We also, in the case of the barrier, do actually extend that conversation out to, as well, to the not only to WRD, but we also want to understand the county as it relates to how they're going to operate and what their needs are, because that will affect, if you will, not so much on the potable side, but certainly on the recycled side, what is the amount that they will be injecting into the barrier, and therefore how are we going to be seeing those sales there. So that you can see here, the West Coast barrier sales are at 2,000 acre feet, Dominguez Gap at 3,000 acre feet, and our retail sales at 103. And so we see ourselves as slightly higher this year. Again, these assumptions were made a little earlier in the year, so we'll hope that we're able to achieve that. But I do want to share that the budget for fiscal year 2021 was at 103,000 acre feet for our retail, and we'll, again, continue to monitor that. All right, to the rates now. So if we look to page 45 of your packet, this is the proposed West Basin imported Tier 1 commodity rate. As I mentioned, it's made up of 3 components, but 1 rate. So as our retail customers, as our water purveyors, the rate that you see today is $14.41 on your water bill. Now, how is that going to change over the next year? Again, we are making a couple recommendations here. One is that we are implementing an increase or adjustment, if you will, on our reliability service charge. And if I say RSC, that's just our quick way of saying our own variable charge there. And you can see that that increase would be effective July 1, 2021, and it's going up $8. Again, this is something you'll see on the fixed service charge. We have not increased our reliability service charge for a number of years. This is the first time, I believe, in 4 years that we've increased this rate. And the reason for it is because we were implementing that fixed service charge, wanted to get that to its full and 100% sort of capacity, if you will, of what we're trying to achieve there. And then once we have achieved that, then we would look to adjusting then onto our reliability service charge. Metropolitan Water District, their Tier 1 rate is going up to $11.43 effective January 1, 2022. And our Metropolitan Readiness to Serve charge is staying with no change, if you will, during the fiscal year at $100 per acre foot. So with Metropolitan Tier imported water rate Tier 1, you can see that this board, the Metropolitan Water District Board, did approve the calendar years 2021 and 2022 back on April 14th, 2020. So again, we knew back then what their anticipated rate increase would be, and that's the information that we're sharing with you today. Again, effective January 1, 2022, going from 1104 to 1143. On the Readiness to Serve charge, this is a charge by Metropolitan Water District that is a fixed charge. So we get it as a fixed charge to us, but a decision was made a number of years ago that rather than Metropolitan collect it on our behalf through their property tax situation, we would collect that charge on our own rates. And so what we do is we take that annual charge and we then actually proportion it to our and get the proportionate share from Metropolitan Water District of what our portion is to their budget. And then we divide it by, if you will, our own acre feet assumption so that we can get to what is the amount that we're going to charge here. So what does that mean? So if you take a look at slide 46, I'm sorry, not 46, slide 48, 48 shows you that calculation. So Metropolitan Water District did talk about their calendar year collection in calendar year 2021 as being 130 million, and then going up to $140 million in 2022. Now, the next part of the equation is, well, what is our portion of that budget? And you can see that our portion of that budget is 7.82%. And that is not changing in calendar year 2022. So if you were to take that 130 million times that 7.82, that would give you the annual for the calendar year basis. But again, because West Basin is on a fiscal year basis, we then need to separate, if you will, the first 6 months at the one rate and the second 6 months at the other rate. And so you can see there, if you take that 130 million times 7.82, divided in half, that is about $5 million that we're collecting in the first half of the year. That is our cost in the first half of the year, and the second half of the year goes up slightly here. So overall, you can see that our commitment to Metropolitan Water District is a little over 10.5 billion. If you divide that by our acre feet assumptions, and again, we use the retail and Dominguez Gap sales in this particular case, and we get to basically $100 per acre foot. West Basin always bills at a whole dollar, if you will, so that's why you see 100 as our rate there. Again, that's the current rate that we have today on the rate, and that's what we're suggesting to move forward as part of that overall West Basin Tier 1 commodity rate. The third component, as it relates to the overall West Basin Tier 1 commodity rate, is the reliability service charge. This is our component as it relates to the imported water rate. Again, it represents the charge to cover the cost of our programs and services. And again, it has remained flat over the time that we were implementing the fixed service charge. So the last time you saw an increase was in July 1, 2017. And we have not seen an increase since then because, again, we were implementing the fixed service charge. And I just gave you a little bit more of a history just to see what we're doing here. So again, we're going up $8. Effectively, that $8 to our acre feet is about $848,000. When we get to the discussion on our fixed service charge, you'll see that we're actually seeing a decrease in our fixed service charge. So the net effect actually to our customers is that there is actually a slight savings, if you will, between the two because we're anticipating that our fixed service charge is actually going down by $886,000. This is going up $848,000. But again, we're trying to keep it relatively neutral to our customers here in this fiscal year 21-22. Well, I wanted just to share also about one other component on the charges, which is our fixed charges. And the first one is the Metropolitan Capacity Charge. This is a pass-through from Metropolitan Water District. It's based on a cubic feet per second, and it's based off of peak usage. And so what we do on this particular one is, again, it's a pass-through. And so what we're trying to do is trying to match what is the cost that West Basin has to pay, and then to try to determine what is it that should be the collections that we get from our customers. So on the left-hand side, you can see what the amount that we need to pay. And again, because we are on a fiscal year basis and Metropolitan is on a calendar year basis, we see sort of 6 months at one rate and 6 months at a different rate. So our peaking is 211.8 CFS, and that is our single highest within the last 3 years. And so we take a look at what our single highest is, and based off of that, we are able to then multiply it by their rates to come up with what is our cost. Now, on the right side of the page, you will actually see what we're suggesting to be passed through to our customers. So our customers, if you look for the calendar year, the first part of the calendar year, it's 253 CFS. And so again, our individual customers peak at different time, and when we just simply add up those individual customers, we get to a total of 253. So while we are being charged $10,700 in that first half of the year, we're able to show, and today we're showing that we're only charging $9,050 per CFS to our customers. Again, we're able to pass on, if you will, effectively a savings on to our customers because of when we peak and when our individual customers peak, and the sum of that, we're able to share that savings, if you will, to our customers. So if you look to the second half of the slide, or the bottom right-hand portion, you can see that the peaking has gone up slightly for our customers over that same time frame as well, that 3-year period of time. But you can see that while the rate is going increasing, you can see it's still less than the amount that the district is paying. And so overall, what we were trying to do, and again, because we do whole dollars, you can see we try to match it as close as we can, and you can see the amount that's reflected there. All right, the other fixed charge that we have is West Basin's, and as I mentioned several times probably at this point, is that we did start to implement this fixed service charge in 1819. And this is after a study we had done with a rate consultant to understand what are our options out there and how can we put this fixed service charge available to our customers. And what we try to do is look at different things. One is what should be our transition period, how are we going to collect it from our customers, and what is going to be our basis of sort of what is the amount of fixed revenue that we're trying to collect. And so the 3 bullets there basically say we're going to transition it over a 3-year period of time. And so that effectively occurred in this fiscal year, 2021. And so now we're at a point where, quote, we're at 100% of our fixed revenue that we were hoping to achieve. And how we're going to allocate that is similar to how we're seeing allocations being done, which is we're going to allocate it based off of historic water purchases. And we picked a 3-year period of time. And then we said, well, what is that budget we're trying to achieve? And so what we said is, let's take a look at 2 budgets that we have, which is our public information and education and water policy budget. It's not saying that these revenues are specifically going to those projects, but it's saying that this is the basis in which we are determining that particular revenue. So today, West Basin is collecting $7.4 million from that fixed service charge. And what we see going forward based off of the proposed expenses for those 2 program budgets, it's at $6.5 million. So you can see that it's there. What I've shown to you here is that effectively, if we were to have a rate increase associated with that, you would have had a $70 going down to $62. And so you can see that the $8 that I'm going up on the reliability service charge is an $8 effectively going down on the fixed service charge. Again, trying to negate, if you will, sort of increases here to our customers. Again, because this is a West Basin charge, we would make that effective July 1, 2021. So this next couple slides here just shows you a little bit more of the data here. This is the basis on which we take a look at that information. It looks at our actual acre feet for the last 3 fiscal years, completed fiscal years. We get that average there, and then we take that average and then we apply it to that budget. And so you can see here what that individual amount is for the customers. And so you can see what's in the 2021 budget and then 21-22. So some individuals go down and some will go up, even though the overall is going down. It's because of what their percentage is to the total. So if your percentage goes up or down, you may see a different number that you see going forward there. So again, this is based off of those 2 budgets and based off of those sales, you can see the amounts that you see there. All right. Almost towards the end, we're here at Recycle Water Sales. And again, what we've shown here is our sales for our refineries, our disaffected tertiary, our irrigation customers, and also to our barrier. And you can see that sales have fluctuated. If you look specifically just even to the table of the numbers that you see there, we were impacted, our customers were impacted by COVID-19. Pandemic. Our refineries saw a reduction, if you will, towards the end of fiscal year 20, and then of course into 2021, we're seeing a little bit still of reduction there, but we anticipate that those sales will rebound as the community opens up and people are starting to travel more, and you see things happening there. As far as our disinfected tertiary customers, our irrigation customers, we are still, pursuing those customers to be able to increase, if you will, those individuals to move towards our recycled water to support, if you will, reliability there. And then on our barrier sales, again, as I mentioned earlier, and I'll just restate here, is that, again, we do get feedback from WRD, but also in the conversations that we've had with the county and what they anticipate as far as sales that we would have for the barrier, or what they anticipate that the level that they would be injecting. We've made some adjustments as it relates to the barrier sales. I will note here that that the barrier has certain sales that certain wells that are under construction currently, and as a result of that, and they anticipate to be out there for a year, and so that's why we see lower numbers than I think our conversations that we had with WRD. I see a question. Let's see. Will I send the slides out? Yes, and actually I will be posting the presentation also to our website, so you can see it there, but it's also under our board agenda items that you on our website as well. So, but in two ways you'll be able to see that. All right, so let me get back to our presentation. Hold on, gotta find my list again. So what does those rates look like? Those rates here, as you shown on, hold on, let me get to the page number. Page 55 of the presentation. These are the rates that we're proposing for our recycled water customers. So we have both inside and outside our service area there. Simply look, if you look at our tier rate structure here for inside service area, we do show an increase there. Effectively, it's the same sort of pass-through, if you will, from Metropolitan Water District as it relates to it. Not because our rates are sort of dependent upon Metropolitan, but there was a notion there that we want to encourage people to move towards recycled water, and we wanted to provide them that incentive to do so, and by trying to keep that sort of delta, if you will, between the two to encourage people to move towards recycled water. In the outside service area, those are to our two customers outside of our service area, and that is the city of Los Angeles and the city of Torrance. And so again, they're also on a tiered rate structure, and it's based off of also other agreements that are set by that. Which takes me to our last slide here, which is the questions. And I know that I've rattled off a lot of stuff. We will certainly by all means be getting that presentation up after today. And with that, I see Kate on screen, so I will open up to her for questions.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. I had a couple of questions, and one I maybe just reading it wrong. I just had a small question about the difference between the designated funds and the pay-go, because I saw he's had 15.6 million as designated funds, but 14.5 as the pay-go. So what's the difference between those two numbers?
Certainly. So as we set our budget, we are setting the budget to achieve a certain financial metric, and that financial metric will then get us designated funds of $15.6 million. And then we will look to reinvest that. So based off of the capital projects that BARC have identified and based off of looking at useful lives, we are trying to utilize as much as we can off of that thing. So it was slightly less than that, as you identified, 14.9, I think you said, 14.7. I have to go back and look. But the idea is that we're trying to, so they're not necessarily going to be the same number, but we're trying to maximize, if you will, the use of our designated funds towards our pay-go projects.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And then my other question might be better for Patrick or the board or a different meeting, but I'm just wondering with the Brewer Desalter, what's happening? Is it going to be decommissioned, or will another agency take it over, or is that still being decided and discussed?
Yeah, I'll answer that one, Kate. Good question. So the board voted recently to develop a plan to divest the agency from this, what has been a great project for 30 years, to remove 50,000 tons of salt from the basin, cleaned it up, and produced a significant amount of drinking water. But our part of it has run its course, and so part of what we did to evaluate this plan is form an ad hoc committee dedicated to just the next steps for the Brewer Desalter, which just started up this month. In fact, April 1st was our first meeting, but we've had, give you an idea of the intensity of these meetings to walk through the next steps. We've had 4, I believe, to date, and we have another one tomorrow. So we're going through the process of basically what's next. The property belongs to Cal Water. We lease it from them, and we own the assets on that property. So the asset disposition is really what the discussions are revolving around right now. How and to who will those assets go? So I think we should have a fairly clear picture here in the next month or so in terms of interested parties. What's the next step? So hopefully that answers your question. It's in process, and it's a top project for me and for the board and for this ad hoc committee that's dedicated just to the Brewer Desalter asset disposition.
Thank you. That's all my questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Director Deere?
I'm just wondering if there are any more questions. That was quite impressive. Very impressive.
Actually, I'll ask one more if no one else is asking questions. It was kind of a small one, so I was just going to let it go. But I did have a question way kind of back in the beginning. It was on slide, oh shoot, I can't find it in my notes, but it was about water policy and resources and the funds that were designated towards that.
Yeah, we can bring that slide back up if you can, Margaret.
I just had a question. And it's a small number, but there was like $50,000 allocated towards grants. And that was a different line item than like the water bottle filling stations. And you might have mentioned it, but I was just curious as to what the $50,000 in grants is for.
Yeah, so the $50,000 there is for consultants to again support our West Basin staff in the pursuit of grants. So it's
Okay.
So it's a grant consultant, if you will, just to be more clear.
Okay, got it. Thank you. All right, that really is all my questions this time.
Thank you. And I did see in the chat room we had a question there about will the slides be sent? Yeah, these will all be posted on our board, and if you want to get a copy directly, just all be posted on our website, I should say. And if you need a copy of them, what was posted yesterday when this meeting was posted, we'd be glad to send them to you directly also. Director Deere?
I'm just trying to chair the meeting, but you've got it right now. See if there are any more questions.
Not hearing any.
Well, we can continue with the agenda, which is there's nothing on the agenda other than the closed meeting.
Yeah, as far as the action calendar today on this meeting, we have no items, nothing on number 6, the information calendar. We do not, as you correctly point out, have a closed session today. Director's comments. I don't know if we have any or not.
Well, we have directors on board. Any comments from our directors?
Yes, Director. As Director Gray. Yeah, I just want to thank staff for the presentations today, and thank you for the customers that were online and the public. So very good presentations and questions that were asked. So thank you for the workshop today. Thank you.
I would agree. And any other director comments? Okay.
Director Deere, I just wanted to say that presentation covered an awful lot of material. There's an awful lot of food for thought there, and encourage everyone that participated that if they didn't have questions today and are thinking about it or have follow-up questions, that they should feel free to ask it, that this is still a work in progress, and that their input is going to be very much appreciated.
Very good. Good point. Thank you. Director Williams, you're aboard?
Yes, I'm here. I timed it perfectly.
Well, I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Well, no, you don't have to. You've done a great job. So go ahead and close it out.
All right, Pat, is there anything else we have to do before we close the meeting?
No, again, just thank you to the customers for their time and others who partook in the meeting. And that's it. We're ready to adjourn.
Thank you very much, everybody who participated. And this meeting is adjourned.